Hello, beloveds, and welcome to Christian Emotional Recovery, a podcast for those who are survivors of childhood trauma, emotional neglect, and narcissistic abuse. This podcast is hosted by Rachel Leroy, a college professor and trauma survivor. Many of us spend years trying to heal and don't get anywhere. We don't always target the trauma itself, which is so often what keeps us stuck. This podcast is where faith meets science. Rachel is an emotional healing expert with 20 years of experience applying healing modalities that helped her start making progress after nothing else worked. She'll show you how to do the same. Each week, we'll cover a topic that will show you how to heal trauma for good. Please check out our website and show notes at ChristianEmotionalRecovery.com and join the Facebook community, Trauma Survivors Unite, Christian Emotional Recovery.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new season of Christian Emotional Recovery, where faith meets science in trauma recovery. I am your host, Rachel Leroy. I am so excited for a new season 3 of the podcast. The podcast has been growing. I'm so grateful. And I wanted to share a little bit about what's new this year, what we'll be covering this year, some new things going on in the platform, and if you'll humor me, in my life. And if you've never listened to the podcast before, this podcast is for healers of trauma, particularly childhood trauma, childhood emotional neglect, and narcissistic abuse in particular, and childhood abuses and adverse experiences, as well as other forms of trauma. So if you're here and it's your first time listening, welcome. If you are a regular listener of the podcast, welcome back, and thank you so much for coming back for season 3. And we have a new season coming up, and I'm so excited about that, and I look forward to sharing with you new things that are happening on the platform and on the podcast. And I also look forward to continuing to teach you about healing from these different issues that a lot of us experience, and how that can inform our faith and how our faith can inform those things. This podcast is a place where science and psychology meet faith, and so I believe in combining the two, and I believe that the best combination is to have a faith that allows you to heal, but also to use other modalities to help you to heal. And I believe those are gifts from God. And that's what I do on this podcast, is empower people, educate people, and help them to see the resources and the modalities and the strategies that can help them to heal that maybe they've never heard of. Or maybe it's a new perspective on something that they have heard of, that you have heard of. So let's go ahead and get started. The first episode of the new year is season 3, episode 1, and it's 12 steps recovery and how it can help you heal trauma and abuse. 12 steps recovery and how it can help you heal trauma and abuse. I wanted to talk a little bit about the upcoming season, since this is the first episode, and since it's been a couple of months since an episode has dropped. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the upcoming season. First, what I've been doing the last couple of months. Well, I took some time off and rested, of course, and I also have been working on building a business. The business is somewhat related to the podcast and to the platform, but right now I'm building an educational business. I have 8 courses on Udemy, and if you're interested, I will put a link in the bottom below, or if you don't see that, you can just look my name up, Rachel Leroy, on Udemy. But I have courses on writing and self-development, and I'm going to put those in the same platform as I use for what I'm building on this platform as well, which I hope to have meditations, tutorials, infographics, and even courses that you can buy in addition to the stuff that will always be free on the platform, which includes the podcast, it includes the Facebook group, and it includes the YouTube channel. But I would like to also make sure that I'm able to continue to do the podcast because, like you, I'm sure you understand, I have bills to pay, and I also have expenses to pay that are increasing for the podcast and for my platform. So I'm looking at new ways to create a business in addition to my teaching. So that's what I've been up to for the last 2 months and what I've especially been doing since the beginning of the new year. And but I will be putting stuff up in the store in the next few months. I've already got most of my courses set up in there. It's quite time consuming, and I'm setting up the advertising. That's also time consuming. So you will see and hear more about that, but I won't bombard you with that. I'll tell you more about the side that you would be interested in. But if you're interested in learning about writing, you can go check that out too. And I will give you more information about things that will be coming to the store that are for this platform soon. And, but you may see stuff there about writing. Thank you for your patience with that. I have gotten on a platform called Podia, and it's where I can put email and subscription bases and courses and products and services and sell them all in one place, and also have a community there for my writers. So if you're interested, like I said, check it out. And if it's not up now, it'll be up soon. And I'm going to house the products and services that I am starting to create in the near future for Christian emotional recovery in the same place, because it saves me money. I don't have the money for 2 subscriptions, so I'm putting it in one place. So thank you for your patience if you go there and you see all that stuff sort of put together in one place. I may separate them in the future, but right now that's what I can do. So, as I said, I plan to create products and resources that will help you from healing narcissistic abuse, other forms of abuse, childhood trauma, other forms of trauma, childhood emotional neglect, and so on. And for this season, though, and for the platform, I plan to put out a survey to see what topics that you might want covered in either the YouTube and or the podcast for this season. If you're not aware, there is a YouTube channel. You can go to the show notes and click subscribe if you haven't. The YouTube channel is kind of quiet compared to the podcast, so check it out. There are things there that you cannot find on the podcast, exclusive things there that are more topic-based. So go check out the YouTube channel, which is also called Christian Emotional Recovery, and you can get a lot of good educational videos there, and there are some meditations there as well. And I'm also on Insight Timer. I'm going to start putting the podcast up there soon, I hope. And also, the meditations are in Insight Timer as well. Insight Timer is a meditation-based app, so you can check that out if you like as well. So, like last season, I'm going to try to release a new podcast episode every 2 weeks or so, and a YouTube video every 2 weeks as well. So hopefully that'll be one thing every week. That is a lot for me because like I said, I teach. I'm also now building a business, and so I'm having to sort of juggle this stuff and go back and forth with it, and that's why the podcast is starting a little late, because I had a little extra time, and I needed time to just work on that. And so, thanks for bearing with me. I'm trying to build something from scratch. I've had a lot of start and stops with business, and honestly, I haven't been successful. So I'm praying for God's favor and goodwill and success, along with some hard work, to build something that is going to help sustain the podcast. So, but with the work, building a podcast and a platform is also a lot of work. And I might get behind at times. So I'm thankful for your understanding. If there's a week where I have to delay the podcast for a week, I'll try not to do that too often. But if I do, please be understanding. And I do appreciate it because I'm not getting paid for this. And that's one reason I'm creating the store. So there can be a component where I'm able to keep doing this so I can pay my bills and all that, because this does take time and energy that I would normally be working at a regular job. And I do have a job, but it's part-time. So I need to, you get the idea. But I would like to bring some guests on the podcast, and but that does involve a lot more time and work than just the regular podcast episodes, which are time and work themselves. So I'll keep working on trying to make that happen based on the resources that I have, when and how I can, and keep this. So basically, that's some of the things that I'm doing in the new year, and some of the things that are happening on the platform and related to the platform. Now, a little bit about the YouTube channel and the podcast this year. A little bit about that. Now, I've already got some ideas for season 3. I'm calling it season 3. Now, the YouTube channel isn't really season 3, but we'll just call it that to keep everything synced up. But some of the topics that I'm thinking about doing for podcast episodes include the 12-step recovery program, which we are talking about in this episode, and IFS, which is internal family systems. It's another healing modality that a lot of therapists use, but also can be used on your own. And we'll talk about how you can do that. We'll also talk about inner child work. If you suffered from childhood emotional neglect, narcissistic abuse, or childhood emotional abuse as a child, then inner child work is everything. It's everything. You might have heard that it's blah blah and woo woo, but it really isn't. A lot of psychology and science backs the efficacy and the power and the results of inner child work. And if you have done any, you also may know how powerful it can be. I've done some inner child work, and it has been life changing. And there is some connection between internal family systems and inner child work, and we'll talk about that in some of the future podcasts as well. Another one we'll talk about is anger. Ooh, I've struggled with anger my whole life, and most people who have complex trauma, you probably have a lot of anger too. So we need to talk about it, especially in the Christian community that can be considered taboo. And I want to talk to you about anger because it's something we need to talk about. And then we're also going to talk about abandonment trauma. That's another thing where things that happened to you in your past, whether you were abandoned literally, emotionally, or both, that it can impact your relationships all the way through your life. So we'll talk about abandonment trauma. We're also going to talk about cognitive distortions and logical fallacies and how flipping those into good thinking. This is not toxic positivity, but it's more like conscious effort to change your thinking with a very specific system, how it can actually help you heal your trauma as well. While most of the work we do is in the body, and that's called somatic work, there's also a mind component that we shouldn't forget about. So we will talk about cognitive distortions and logical fallacies, which is the thought processes that arise as a result of trauma. And then the power of gratitude to heal trauma. I will be honest, I take a lot of the stuff that I struggle with and I turn it into a lesson. One, because if I'm going through it, there's probably a lot of other people going through it too. Two, because if I'm going through it, like I said, there's probably a great need for it. And three, because it's something I need, and I found if I teach something, it helps me too. So the power of gratitude to heal trauma, I actually created a course on gratitude a few years ago. And we're going to talk about the power of gratitude to heal trauma and how we can use gratitude towards God's blessings and towards life in general to help heal trauma, and how it can help you heal thoughts that can block you from the best things that can come to you in your life. Number 8, sorry, I'm going down a list. So other podcasts that we'll do this season, I'm going to do some repurposed YouTubes. I try to keep those limited, but like I said, when I have limited time, sometimes I do that. And it also cross-promotes, so it allows people that are not aware of the YouTube channel to become more aware of it and to subscribe to it. But I also, keep in mind, put all of the YouTube episodes on the, I put all of the podcasts on the YouTube channel, so you can access them either in your favorite podcast location, or you can go to the YouTube channel and watch them there. So that's up to you. It's convenient for you to find them wherever you need them. And then I'm also probably going to do a 2-part series on religious trauma and religious abuse. This is taboo also in the Christian community and in a lot of religious communities, but it's something we need to talk about. Why is there such a mass exodus from churches these days? Why are so many people walking away? That is a very complex topic, and I know there's not one answer, and I know there's a lot of controversy there, and I know there's a lot of different reasons, but there's just a lot of things that, I like to be, there's a scale of something called agreeableness, and I score very high on that scale. But I don't like conflict. I don't like argument. Controversy, it depends on what it is. I actually have when I've gotten older, more comfortable with tackling controversies and discussing them and even debating them with people. And I tend to keep my political views and even a lot of my religious views, strangely, I try to keep this more, I don't want to say a generic Christian. That makes it sound kind of bad, but I try to keep it neutral because I have a diverse listening base. I have liberals listening. I have Christians that are more conservative listening. I have most people that listen are Christians, but I have non-Christians that listen. If anybody can be helped by this podcast, everybody's welcome here. And I don't want to exclude anybody. I do believe in being inclusive. And I've got a lot of, like I said, conservative and liberal people on here, people from different political parties, different countries, different ethnic backgrounds, different denominations. I think that's one thing that makes Christianity beautiful is the diversity of traditions, the diversity of denominations, and so on. I've got Catholic and Protestant and Greek Orthodox and unaffiliated, unchurched Christians. I hate that word, actually. But Christians who don't have a formal church, or they go back and forth to different churches, or they are a member of a couple of different churches. I know one guy, he's a Baptist minister and his wife's Catholic. And so on Sunday morning, they go to church and he preaches, and then on Sunday night, they go to Mass. And I think that's great. There's just... The thing about Christianity is it's so diverse. That doesn't mean anything goes. That's not what I'm saying. I believe if you're going to practice Christianity, there are certain core tenets, but there's a lot of debate about doctrine, and I'm not going to get into that here. The whole point is, though, is that there's also been a lot of abuse in the church, and a lot of abuse, especially in certain sects of the church. So I'm not going to say anything goes, and I'm actually going to start calling out a few types of doctrines that can actually promote abuse, that can promote keeping people in situations of abuse. And a lot of those are more like culty type denominations, and they're really extremist fundamentalist. I'm not downing a conservative Christian church, so please don't say that I'm doing that. There's a lot of good conservative Christian churches that don't do that. But there are some that are really, really just way out there, and they are continuing to promote suppression of women and, stuff like that. They're continuing to promote people should stay in abusive marriages, particularly women. And yeah, we will talk about that some, because I don't think we can sweep it under the rug anymore. I think it needs to be dealt with, and I think it needs to be talked about. And that's exactly what the healing path is all about, and how certain extreme doctrines can cause harm and can even cause trauma. And we're going to talk about how to cope with the fact that maybe you were brought up in a very strict or a very fundamentalist or a very rigid religious home, and maybe there was even abuse, and that abuse mixed in with the religion and the faith, and you have a distorted view of God now. We're going to talk about how to separate those two. And honestly, I don't have all the answers, but we're going to talk about it because I think it's something that we need to talk about. And then some of the other episodes that we'll cover are, I want to talk more about childhood emotional neglect. That was my most watched episode besides the series on narcissistic abuse last season. So it must have resonated with people, and it resonates with me. So we're definitely going to talk more about childhood emotional neglect. And we're going to talk about dealing with the hardest questions out there in terms of just existence. I know that's kind of a big, broad one, but, I think that people are thinking more deeply, and I think people are questioning things more, and we can't run away from these hard issues. And so I want us to talk about that and how trauma connects to these hard questions about existence and God and just life. And then we're going to talk about trauma reenactment and patterns. How, if you have a pattern in your life, and you had, especially if you had a recurring situation of, say, abandonment or of outbursts, maybe somebody around you had outbursts and you cower from people who even get mad. We'll see how we can have situations in our life that keep replaying certain patterns that we grew up with. It sucks. It's not fair. It's not our fault. But it does happen, and that's the way it is. It makes me mad sometimes, just the way life works, how trauma works. It sucks. It's not fair. You're right. Why do we have to deal with this our whole childhood and then turn around and just... Then it takes us decades to overcome this stuff. But you know what? Sometimes those experiences, I'm not saying that it's good they happen. I'm not. Okay? But sometimes what we learn from those and what kind of person we become because we heal and through the healing, not because of the trauma itself, but because we heal and through the healing and overcoming of it, God uses that to make us a more compassionate, deeper, insightful, intuitive, healing, helpful person who can do more in the world, whether you're in the medical profession or you're a teacher or you clean up people's yards for a living, that wherever you're at and whatever you're doing, it doesn't matter. You can be a blessing to people. And some people even do stuff like what I'm doing. Not everybody, but everybody can help people where they're at in ways that they're able to do so because of their experiences. They can recognize abuse if they see it. They can see people that are hurting. You're more attuned to that than most people are. That's the beauty of it. So those are some of the things that we're going to cover in the podcast episodes this season. And in terms of the YouTube channel, we are going to cover, there's an acronym called DARVO that I want to go over, and it's basically about how abusive and manipulative and sometimes narcissistic people will take something that they did to you and flip it. And by the time they're done, when you call somebody on something they genuinely did, somehow you're the one apologizing. I want to tell you about that acronym so you can be educated about when people do that and you can see through it. You can see through their lies and their manipulation. There's another one I want to do a video on the pitfalls and or the misconceptions that you can make when healing, because healing is hard, and a solution to avoid each pitfall. And we've talked about something similar last season, but it wasn't exactly that. And then another one is, what do you do when healthy people you love push you away? I've really thought about that because honestly, that's an area where I've struggled, and I've struggled a lot in that area. And I'm going to talk about it by using a Reddit post, or it might have been Quora, I can't remember. But I know that's a strange place, but I have found some of the best wisdom, not in literary or academic journal articles, but in places where just average folks are talking about topics, and they're actually deep and intuitive and intelligent. And I believe that we can get wisdom. Yes, it comes from the Bible. Yes, it comes from God. But I also believe you can find it in literature and psychology and art and conversations and music and places like this, podcasts, YouTube. And I love to find a broad spectrum of perspectives and ideas from different media. And strangely enough, Quora and Reddit are places you can do that. But I want to talk there about what to do when healthy people you love, healthy people, yes, push you away. Ouch, right? So that I like to talk about stuff nobody else is talking about. And I don't see that one a lot. And I want to talk about it. So there's also when people you love tell you you're too needy, or dealing with envy of healthy friends. If you have any friends or family members that maybe didn't go through the stuff you did and you're having a relationship with them and their lack of a struggle and your struggle puts a strain on your relationship, that is not your fault. And I want to talk about that too, because I don't see people talking about that much, and it needs to be addressed. And so other things that I want to talk about in the YouTube this season are Facebook channels that you might want to follow if you're in trauma recovery. I've talked about some YouTube channels and some books, and we'll come back to some more of those in the future, but I'd like to talk about Facebook channels if you're on Facebook. Another one, why validation and self-validation is so important. And also I want to talk about attachment styles and how that can impact your relationship, how that interacts with codependency, if you deal with codependency, and just how attachment styles affect relationships and affect certain dynamics, and how if you have childhood trauma, if you do suffer from codependency, or if you've been around a lot of narcissistic abuse or childhood emotional neglect or emotional abuse, how that might create your attachment style. What are the different kinds and what are the different combinations, and how do those work, and how to know which one you are in if you're in a relationship. It could be a romantic relationship, but it could be with a coworker or a friend or a parent or a child or a sibling. It could be a neighbor. It could be anybody that you're close to and spend a lot of time with. So those are some of the topics that we'll talk about. Another one I want to talk about, I'm not sure if it'll be in the podcast or the YouTube, types and categories of narcissists. Ooh, yes, there are types and categories. Those are two different things, actually, and subcategories. So we'll talk about that. And another one is, what is it like to deal with people who don't understand trauma and abuse and what to do about it? That's another one that I don't see a lot of. I've seen a little bit, but not a lot. So I'm trying to cover gaps where there's a need. And I hope that these topics will be helpful for you this season. And I really look forward to learning about them myself, but also being able to convey what I learned to you as we go on this healing journey together. I may be a teacher, but I'm also a learner too, and I learn from you every day. And I'm so thankful for you, and I'm so thankful to be able to do this work for God, for you, and for the healing community. I'm so grateful, and I'm so blessed to be able to do it.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Christian Emotional Recovery, hosted by Rachel Leroy. For links to this week's resources and to join the discussion, check out this episode's show notes at ChristianEmotionalRecovery.com, where you can also find links to our YouTube channel and Facebook group. Join our email list and get other episodes and resources. If you enjoyed the podcast, please rate and review the podcast and tell a friend who may benefit from this message. See you next time. And remember, beloveds, God loves you, and you are fearfully and wonderfully made.